Welcome to Triangle BNI. Today's show is brought to you by Oak City Tech. We've been talking every week, folks. The digital world is very crowded and very loud. You need experts to help you get found, connect with your current clients better, connect with future clients. Please go to oakcitytech.com. Tell Drago we said hi. I know they'll be able to help you. Hi, everybody. My name is Mike Manning. Each week on Triangle BNI, we bring you a small business success story. If you are not familiar with BNI, it is Business Networking International, the world's largest networking organization. Our little slice of heaven here in the Triangle, Raleigh, Durham, and Chapel Hill. Each week, almost 30 chapters and about 600 members meet, and our sole goal is to help our fellow members grow their business. Today's small business success story is Miller Lawson with the Lawson Insurance Group. Miller, how are you today?
I'm doing great, Mike. Thanks for having me on. Really excited to be here.
Well, glad to have you. Got a number of things to get at. First of all, I like the room you're sitting in. We will get to your sports background,
Okay.
first of all. But Miller is a member of RDO3, the Wake Forest Power Hour. They meet Thursday mornings at 8 a.m. Right now, it's by Zoom. When we get back to in-person meetings, and I don't know if Vegas has even taken bets on that anymore, Miller, we are week to week, as they used to describe people in the sports world back when you were playing. But they meet at the Wake Forest Coffee Club on the second floor. So if you are in the Wake Forest area, want to meet some good folks, we can get you the Zoom link for their meetings on Thursday morning. Go visit, see who you meet, and hopefully we can get you signed up to that chapter, help you grow your business. All right, Miller, love your story. You are not only a family organization, but a second generation family organization. Your dad started Lawson. Originally, it was a nationwide agency that your dad started back in 1974. And I think the connection there was with Terry Nobles, correct? Big T.
Big T. That is absolutely right. Dad had a hardware store at the corner. We're Raleigh natives. So he had a hardware store at the corner of Six Forks and Millbrook Road, Colony Shopping Center. And his insurance agent was Big T, and just suggested to him one day that he'd be a good insurance agent. Um, they had several conversations, and Dad ended up putting a desk in the front of Lawson's Hardware and started working with Nationwide in the early '70s, and it just boomed from there. So, we've always lived no more than 5 miles from the office. We've just been in North Raleigh ever since. We've had offices in other locations throughout Raleigh, but pretty much been based in North Raleigh since then.
And I do want to talk about, because you're involved in this with your other brothers, Ken and Mike, kind of how your dad got started. I think Ken was the first one to move in there. And then at one point in time, the three of you had your own offices. Now you've merged back into one. And we'll talk about that because I think that's a real good story. We've had insurance people on before. And one of the things that BNI has taught me is to shop local. Don't want to say anything bad about anybody that advertise, any of these companies that advertise nationally on TV. But I keep preaching to people, you want the cell phone number of your insurance person and your banker, if nothing else.
Absolutely, and we've always been of that same mindset, Mike. The local community has taken care of our family so well, and every insurance company out there is going to represent a national company. But it's the local person who lives there and works there and is in the community that I feel you're going to get the most benefit from. Our kids play together, they go to school together, and that kind of thing. So it may be a national name on the building for an exclusive agent, but it's still a local business that's owned by someone living and working and playing in your community. So we've always been of that same mindset.
What do you remember when you were growing up, when your dad was, I guess when he became, if I could say, a full-time insurance agent,
Mm-hmm.
the difference then to now with either the industry or the relationships?
Well, there, in the '70s when he hung his shingle up, that's pretty much all you put your shingle up and people came in. They looked through the yellow pages and they found you. But other than that, it was word of mouth, which is where I think BNI has continued that tradition. But the changes that we've seen with, the internet and social media and all of that, it has been fantastic because we can reach other people. It's made it really easy for someone to go on and get quotes. There are, you know, there are a ton of insurance companies in North Carolina that nobody knows about. They're strictly online. It's an 800 number. They're all good companies. You have to go through some very serious regulations to be licensed to sell as a company to be able to sell insurance in North Carolina and do business here. Um, but when you're doing it all online or all with a toll free number, you miss that one to one not negotiation, that one to one information and advice from your insurance agent.
You want to be able to call somebody at 11 o'clock at night if you have a flooded basement
Mhm.
or a car accident coming from home. I've had to do that before on a car accident at night. And it gave me great peace of mind because the person I was calling, I knew.
Right.
And I didn't have to explain anything. I didn't have to be transferred to anybody. That's why I'm a big fan of find the right agent for you and the right coverage for you, but find somebody locally that you can call and more importantly, that will answer their phone at 11 o'clock at night.
It's really interesting. Quick story, Mike, about that. Really good friend of mine, years and years ago. His wife was in our wedding. They lived in Charlotte, and we were looking at their insurance and trying to do business with them. And he had always heard never do insurance with a friend, which
Mhm.
I didn't understand. He loved our prices, but he would not do business with me personally. I referred him to my brother, Michael, who had an office in Durham at that time, and Michael wrote the business. He loved the prices, he loved the company, but he wouldn't do business with me for some reason. And what you said was my exact comment. I said, if you have a house fire at 2 a.m., who are you going to call? You're still going to call me. And the agent might not be able to do very much at that time, but we can at least calm them down, give them the process, and talk them through it. So yeah, having somebody that will answer your call is very important.
What was marketing like for your dad back in the mid to late 70s?
Word of mouth, word of mouth. He was involved in, the Rotary Club and the JCs, and he coached youth football and baseball for 15 to 20 years. The local swim club that everybody went to. Back in the 70s, everybody did everything in their neighborhoods. Just like we're talking about now, shopping local, everything happened very close to your home for the most part. So just being out and around, knowing people, letting people know what you did, which to me ties right into the BNI motto of shopping local and getting the word out and using other people's connections. So that there was not a lot of quote unquote advertising. You put yourself in the yellow pages. You tried to have a big ad if you had money, and that was about it.
How many little league teams did he sponsor?
He only sponsored a couple here and there. Lawson was on the jerseys of a couple of different teams, but we were normally in the Raleigh City rec leagues, and we had different sponsors growing up, all local sponsors, which was fantastic. Just different businesses that he knew and that he worked with.
Did they let local sponsors put their name on jersey, or is everybody taking the name of the major league teams?
Back then,
No, now. It's been a
now,
while since I've done this.
yeah, I know that my nephew has just gotten on a travel baseball team that is associated with a major league team, but I think there are still especially in the youth, in the very young. I think they're still doing sponsorships and then sponsorships around the field and in magazines and that kind of stuff.
I remember way back in the day, this would have been in Memphis. I think it was Memphis. That would have been second grade for me. I remember playing on Hunter's Body Shop.
We played for Ace Glass. We played for Colony Shopping Center. Domino's Pizza was a big one for us. The Sizzler Steakhouse was another one that I was at. Jolly's Jewelers was a great baseball team, youth, teenage baseball team, Wendy's, all kinds of good stuff.
That because it was always at that age, it's what's the snack at the end of the game and where can we go
Absolutely.
for a meal?
That's it. Absolutely right.
If somebody's moving to the area today and I had to give them advice, give me two questions they would want to ask their future insurance person.
Two questions they'd want to ask their future insurance person. If they're moving from out of state, one of the things is, what are the limits here in North Carolina? What are the changes or the differences from the state that I'm coming from? North Carolina is a rate bureau state, and things happen a little bit differently in North Carolina. We don't have enough time to get into all of that here today, but I would just ask what the differences are. North Carolina has long been, one of the lowest 5 states in the country as far as auto insurance. And so when people move here from other states, they're a little confused about how low it is. Now, if you've been in North Carolina forever, you think it's the rates are high, but comparatively, it brings up some questions. And then the other part is, I would always question liability. Your auto and your homeowners have liability coverages on them, but most people don't know what that's for. So just to get an idea of what the coverages are, I try to explain as much as somebody wants to explain. I don't expect them to understand everything I tell them, but I want them to know that I understand it and I'm looking out for their best interest.
I know in your world we hear it a lot, but it happens in most industries. But I guess through BNI, there's a couple of industries and insurance being one of them that on a semi-regular basis, I hear, well, I changed insurance agents because my guy never called me back or I've
Mhm.
never gotten an annual review. And that's important because you had a kid moves out, you buy a car, you kind of want to know you've got and again, I've learned you want the correct coverage.
Absolutely. Any type of major life change, marriage, divorce, children, retirement, new job, putting an addition on your house, new car. It is up to the policyholder to contact the insurance agency. But those reviews can be so important. And what we try to do is when we're talking to a new client is ask them, how often do you want to be contacted? Do you want a yearly phone call? Some people don't. They just maybe they want an email. Maybe they don't want to deal with it. They're going to handle their payments and everything online. But we try to get a feel. And with the client management systems that are out there now, you can set up all kinds of reminders. We have notes in about who wants to be contacted and who doesn't, and just try to go by their wishes on what they're looking for.
It's it's probably a good thing that it's an automatic renewal because some people just don't call their clients back. And I wonder if that would change it or if it would just make it worse for the client.
Well, I mean, there are several. There's two ways of thought. Some people make annual calls the month before the renewal, and it piques the interest of the policyholder to look at their renewal, and that's never a bad thing. Just to review it.
Mhm.
Some of them do it by alphabet. Hey, in January we're calling all the A's and B's in the alphabet. There's no right or wrong way. Again, it comes down to what the policyholder, how often do they want to be contacted? Do they want to be contacted every year, or do they feel like we're hounding them if we're doing that? Everybody's got their different feelings on that.
Are you guys licensed in any other states?
We are licensed in South Carolina and Virginia. We don't do a lot of advertising there. That's mostly for our clients who, maybe have a secondary home there. We do have some business clients in each one of those states, but we don't do a lot there. But we are licensed in those states.
It makes a lot of sense, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Especially in North Carolina, we have the beach and the mountains, but if you want, a little bit more commercialized beach, you go one state south, or higher mountains, you go one state north. And,
Yeah.
with the lakes that we have on the border of Virginia, somebody looking for a lake house, can be on either side. So it definitely makes sense for us to do that.
We are here with Miller Lawson with the Lawson Insurance Group. Miller's in RDO3. They meet Thursday mornings at 8 a.m. in Wake Forest. Today's show is brought to you by Oak City Tech. Folks, one of the first things you need is a web site, and a good one. You don't need $100,000 worth of bells and whistles, but you just need it to be functional. If people can't find you, doesn't matter how good your product or service is, we recommend you go to oakcitytech.com, tell them what you're looking for. I know they'll be able to help you. All right, Miller, your second generation insurance family. Your brother Ken was the first one to follow Dad's footsteps, correct?
That's correct. I'll kind of give you the rundown. Dad was in business for a long time. When Ken got out of college, he actually started with Nationwide in claims in the claims department, which was a great entry point for him. And then in the early '90s, he transitioned to be an agent. He and Dad worked in the same office space, but Nationwide considered them two different entities. It was the Ken Senior Agency and the Ken Junior Agency. So they were growing together. And then in 1999, my younger brother Michael left his accounting job and came in to the agency. And in 2002, I left Charlotte and moved back home to get into the family business. So at that point, we were all together. In the early 2000s, Dad had his 30 years in with Nationwide, and so he officially retired from Nationwide as an agent, not from the business. So Ken Jr. was the primary agent, and we all worked for him. And then in 2005, Michael got an opportunity to purchase an agency in Durham. So he moved and opened that agency. In 2008, I had the opportunity to purchase an agency. And so I had an office in Knightdale and an office in North Raleigh. So we were back to in the same business, but now working in different locations. And then in 2017, 2018, we were allowed to merge. Nationwide allowed us to merge because they saw things going towards the independent arena. We merged our agencies. The three of us came together. There aren't many people, Mike, many families that can work and play together and get along. And we've had some tense conversations, but we knew when we merged, we divided up the responsibilities. We each have our role in the agency. We are co-owners of the entire business now. And it's worked really, really well since we merged. I guess it was right at the beginning of 2018.
When your when you each had your own location,
Mhm.
and not asking numbers here, was it a one bottom line, one pool everybody fed in, or how did you guys differentiate who does what and the splits of the time and the money and the staff and everything like that?
We incorporated in the early 2000s. So we were Lawson Insurance Group, and so we decided when we had three agencies, everything came into the same bucket. We each had different size agencies based on what we had either built or purchased, but everything came into the same bucket. We got together. Michael and Ken and I have had monthly board meetings for years that we would get together off-site usually, so the phones aren't ringing, and we discuss, the staff, the marketing, salaries, everything that's going on, and we would make decisions that way. So even though Nationwide saw us as three separate entities, we worked as one Lawson Insurance Group.
Can I assume one of those board of directors meetings was on a hunting trip?
We have had one or two on a hunting trip, and actually our offsite meeting this year, we went to a hunt camp just to be away, to be fully away, just to get away from the phones, so we could really focus. We had a 2-day business meeting, and it was actually we stayed true to what our purpose of that trip was. If we're going to leave home, we want to make sure that we're talking about business, and we did a really good job of staying on track.
Now, I've known Ken the longest. We go back to the probably late 70s with junior tennis. I've met Michael once or twice, and you and I have known each other for a little while. Personalities, how did you guys figure out how those three would mesh in a business arena?
we knew that there were going to be differences. When we had our three offices, we each managed our staff differently and our day-to-day office operations differently. So we knew that going in, and we would discuss that. So when we came into the office, we spent a lot of time with a coach, with a business coach, um, who knew our family well, who knew the insurance industry well. Um, Coming up with very defined roles on what we were going to do. When we had our separate agencies, I was the personal line sales, I was commercial sales, I was janitor, I was everything. So when we got together, we really defined our roles. Currently, I'm the personal lines manager. Ken Jr., who's been in it longer, is the commercial lines manager. Michael, with his accounting background, is our operations manager and handles all of that. And it's really helped us kind of take a couple of the hats off that we were wearing before and really focus and be more efficient in what we're doing.
What effect has COVID had on the financial side of the business, mainly because people aren't driving as much anymore? Has that affected much? And then also, how often do you three get together these days? And is that any different than before COVID?
Um, we are back in the office. The insurance industry was deemed essential, um, but we did go home for a little while. We were set up to work remotely with all of our staff. Everybody had their own computer, their own laptop. Our phone system is through the computer, so that worked out really well. Um, and it was interesting. Everything was a little bit slower the first couple of months during the shutdown. But then over the summer, with people home, honestly, Mike, it got really busy. People had time to review what they had. Their renewals were coming up, and they started calling. The insurance companies in general actually sent out refunds. Most of them, if not all of them, did some type of refund or discount because people weren't driving as much, and so there were fewer claims. So that's been really interesting for us to go through with that. As far as us getting together, we've had very few days that we're not in the office, but we're all in separate areas of the office. I will go 2 or 3 days without actually seeing one of my brothers. I can talk to them even though they're just upstairs or just next door, but we all have our own things that are going on. We do try to get out occasionally, away from the office just to have some time together as brothers. But for us, it's been business as usual.
Feel free to mention a name if you want to. You don't have to if you don't. But who how long has your longest running client been with the Lawson family?
Wow. We have some that have been with us since the easily the 80s, if not the 70s.
Yeah.
A couple of years ago, we hired an employee who had been with us back in the 90s. And there were a lot of people that called in and said, "Oh, you're back. That's great. Good to see you again." Um, we have some 30 and 40-year clients that have been with us. And they all remember dad. Dad passed away in 2011. And it's great to talk to some of those clients and just hear the stories that they would tell. A lot of times it's stuff we didn't know about. But we have a lot that remember back in those early days.
I bet you learned some stories about the way your dad, probably a number of funny ones that we won't go into, but I bet you got a different sense of your dad as a businessman, that people called you and told you, let me tell you what your dad did for me one night when I thought everything was just over and done with.
Absolutely, we got those. Even once he officially retired from Nationwide, he always stayed after hours just so he could answer those late night phone calls. Someone would call to leave a voicemail, and he just missed talking to clients. With the internet being so big and people making payments and doing that stuff, he just missed that face to face part of that. And we still get those people who call in and say, I called to leave a message at 8 o'clock, and I talked to your dad for an hour and a half just because I didn't know what I was going to do, and he gave me such great advice. It was that face to face or person to person, whether it's on the phone or in the office, that communication and that relationship that he was able to build that way.
Yeah, because back then there were no cell phones and there was certainly no internet, and it was the landline was the only way to get somebody, and it was a crucial piece of business.
In the office that I'm sitting in right now was his office. In this building that we're in, he purchased this in 1986. If you can believe, Six Forks was a 2-lane road at that time.
Yeah, I
Um,
remember.
yeah, you remember that, and I vividly remember the insurance company coming in and telling him, if you don't take those computers out of the closet and plug them in and actually use them, we're going to take your contract. You have to use computers. And he just did not want to use the computers. He liked everything by hand. He didn't trust them. He eventually came around. We plugged the computers in, but he was slow to change. That's for sure.
Was your mom involved in the hardware and the insurance part of the world?
She was not involved at all in the hardware store. She worked for dad for less than a year at one point, and both of them realized that that was not a very good mix. And so, she went on and worked for the school system and retired with Wake County School System. But she was there as support, but in the office it was not a very good mix.
Why did he open a hardware store?
He had always wanted a hardware store. He had worked in the glass business for several years. He came to Raleigh as a banker, worked in the glass business for several years, and had always wanted a hardware store. And at that time, it was local hardware stores, sitting on the corner. And he had a lot of fun with it. He enjoyed it, but just the retail part of it, I think, was wearing him down. Of course, I was very young at the time. These are all stories that I've heard, but he really saw a career in the insurance business and actually started as just a commercial agent. That's when insurance companies would hire someone to sell just business insurance or just personal lines insurance. So he started out just selling business insurance and then transitioned into the personal lines.
Now, behind you, if you're listening, you're obviously not going to see this, but Miller, and this is my show, Miller, so I get to say pretty much what I want to. Miller was a legendary football player at Sanderson and went on to become one of the most well-respected players at NC State. Was it a no-brainer you were going to state to play football?
First of all, you build me up quite a bit. I don't think I stand up to that intro, but um, I wanted to play college football. I did not have the size or the speed to really get recruited heavily. I had gone to camps at NC State and met the staff, and they liked me. I had looked at a couple of smaller schools, but State offered me a chance to walk on and try to make the team. We had grown up going to state games. Dad was in the Wolfpack Club. I never really thought about that growing up, but it was a dream of mine. At the time, Ken Jr. was over at Carolina in school. He really wanted me to walk on over there. That was Mac Brown's first tenure over there, and he didn't show much interest in me as a player, or they didn't. And State gave me the opportunity. That's what it was. It was an opportunity that turned out very positive.
And you were an offensive lineman.
I was close to. My main goal was long snapping.
Okay.
They also let me play tight end, and I enjoyed that part as well.
I was one of the fun jobs I have is professionally stalking guests, so I can learn little nuggets and everything. And your stat line as a tight end in your career, if this is correct, I've got you for 3 catches for 36 yards.
That is dead on. That is dead on. And that was either in big wins or big losses. But I was happy to do it. I was just happy to be on the sidelines. Mom and Dad had been in the stands for so long, and they sat right behind the bench, so I could turn and tell them, "Hey, I'm going in the game." So that was a lot of fun.
Give me the biggest moment that you were on the field for, a big play, an end of a game, anything like that.
Well, that was pretty easy. My career peaked my freshman year. I redshirted my first year, and then the first year I played, we were in Chapel Hill, playing in Chapel Hill, and it was my first game as the starting long snapper. We were tied 9-9 with 1 second on the clock, and we lined up for a 56-yard field goal, which is still currently the the longest field goal in NC State history. I believe that's a picture of it from the Durham Herald from behind us. But I snapped for that, and the kick went in by about 2 feet. Damon Hartman kicked it, and so we ended up winning the game. And it was great for me being a part of that rivalry. It was great for me to be a part of that play. And I also knew that Ken Jr. was up in the stands in the Rams club, rooting for a great snap but a bad kick.
Right.
But he was the first one to greet me outside the locker room, give me a hug.
Who was the holder?
The holder was Terry Jordan. He was our quarterback at the time.
Yeah.
Local product, Bobby Juergens was the normal holder, but Bobby had gotten injured during the game. He had injured his shoulder. So he was not there. So my first game as the snapper, and Terry was our backup holder, even though he was the quarterback. So it was just incredible experience.
Now, in the holder and the snapper rarely get, I won't even say any credit. They rarely even get recognized. It's just the kicker. The kicker gets credit for making it, but if it's a bad snap, it's never the kicker's fault for missing it, right? When did you snap in high school?
I started actually snapping in middle school, East Millbrook Middle School, where I was playing center, and I was snapping then. In high school, I did snap some, but I was also the kicker. We didn't have a whole lot of people on our team at Sanderson, so I was doing the kicking. I did snap for the punts, but we kind of just did what was needed at the time. But that was one thing that I had learned early on, and that I saw there was a need at State, and so they allowed me to come do it, which I'll forever be grateful for that.
And you can always tell your Carolina friends, right? Yeah. Hey,
it comes up a lot.
Quick story, boys. Just bear with me on this, right? So, but 56 yards. Was it a no-brainer to kick it because?
It was. I mean, it was a field goal game. There was 1 second left, and that was truly our only shot. And Damon Hartman was the kicker, and he had an incredibly strong leg. I think the record before that was a 54-yarder, also by Damon. So it really, there was never a thought about throwing a Hail Mary. They just said, let's go do it.
Now, how often do you see Terry or Damon these days?
I've seen Damon at some of the reunions we get back to. I've spoken with Terry on the phone a couple of times. I haven't seen him in several years. But each year they over at State, there's a reunion in the spring, and which is a lot of fun. A lot of guys come back to, and it's all the stories are the same, but they're embellished just a little bit differently every year.
Is that field goal now an unofficial 62-yarder?
It might be longer than that at this point.
And into a 30-mile-an-hour wind, right?
Of course.
We are here with Miller Lawson with the Lawson Insurance Group. Miller's a part of BNI Group in Wake Forest, meets Thursday mornings at 8 a.m. If you're in the area, you want to meet some good folks, please go visit. Today's show is brought to you by Oak City Tech. One of the things you need, folks, is an expert in social media, because there's 1,000 ways to mess that up. There's like 1 million platforms. You got to design your own post. So find somebody that knows that world, can do this on a professional basis, help you get your message out there. Go to oakcitytech.com, tell them what you're looking for. They'll be able to help you with that. All right, Miller, one of my favorite questions on the show for married folks. I would love to know how you and Amy met, and do you both tell the story the same way?
I think we do, because we've told it together so many times. I was living in Charlotte, as was she. We met late. I think we were both 29. There was a friend of mine that I worked with that I'd gotten to know his family very well. His mom worked with Amy. She was a buyer at Belk department stores. And it was actually this buddy of mine, Brian, his mom wanted to set us up. And so Brian called me one Thursday night and said, hey, let's, come meet me at this tavern over here. And I said, Brian, it's on the other side of Charlotte. And he said, no, you got to come meet this girl. Okay. So I showed up on a Thursday night and met her at Thomas Street Tavern. If anybody knows the Charlotte area, wonderful place. And the next night there was a group that was going to go to see chairman of the board. Love beach music. They were playing up at Lake Norman, so we had a. This is where the story differs, Mike, in how we tell it, because it was a group date or a group that was going. I picked her up. And so to her, that meant I should pay her way into the club. I didn't see it that way. I'm still paying for that. But we went that night and had a blast listening to music. My college roommate was there, and he was out on the dance floor, and he's just one of the most fun guys I've ever met in my life. And she looked at me and said, "Is he going to be in our wedding?" And I said, "Yeah, he's going to be in the wedding." And so that was 24 hours after we met, and we got engaged a couple of months later, and got married Christmas, December 29th of 2001.
Very nice. And you are a proud father. You are a girl dad, I think is the phrase, right?
I am a girl dad. I'm a dance dad is what I am, Mike.
Oh,
I think,
good.
I truly believe that God gives us what we need in our lives. And when I got through college, I coached college football for a couple of years. And, working with college athletes is a little different than working with youth. I knew that if I had a son or a daughter that was in youth sports, stick and ball sports, softball, baseball, football, that I would want to be involved. And I'm not sure how I would have handled that after working on a higher level. But my daughter fell in love with dance. And it only took me 1 year to realize that was truly a sport. I don't know anything about it, but I love watching it. We were not heavy in the arts in my family growing up. So I have truly learned an appreciation for what they do and what they go through. And she's fantastic. I love watching her dance. She's at a great dance studio up in Wake Forest, and it's truly been a blessing for me.
Can I ask politely if you are gifted in the area of dancing?
You can absolutely ask that, and I can unequivocally say no, I am not. My wife danced growing up and danced when she was in college at UNC Charlotte on their dance team. One of the fun things, though, Mike, being a dance dad, I want to be fully involved with her life and what she's going through. One of the competitions we were just at last weekend, each year they have a parents class on Sunday morning. And so I said, why not? I don't know what she goes through choreography and learning moves. And so I've taken the dance class, and I'm always the only male in there. And it's really ugly, but it's a lot of fun. We have a great time with it. It's exhausting. But I figure I want to understand what she goes through so I can have conversations with her about what she's interested in.
Very cool. I want to go back real quick to the decision you made to go meet Amy the first time.
Mhm.
I'm a big fan of moment in time decisions. If you had told your buddy, you know what, dude, wrong side of town, been a long week, tired, would you get another chance to meet Amy? And if you never met Amy, who's where? And I love those thoughts and stories of, A, I'm glad I did that, or B, glad I didn't. But I just want, I have those questions of people. If you didn't go that night, who do you end up with? Who does she end up with?
I've never thought about that, Mike. It came together so perfectly.
Mhm.
At the time, we had both been single for quite some time. And I had a lot of friends in Charlotte, but I wasn't doing a whole lot. I had done a lot of the social scene very early in my life. I enjoyed hanging out with friends, and most of my friends were married at the time. And so it was never a second thought once he said that.
Yeah.
I really can't imagine what would have happened. Knowing his mom, she would have found another way to get us together. She was that determined. But it was absolutely the right thing. And I've never thought about what could have happened if I didn't make that call.
Right. I just love those moments. But the fact that your friend and his mom probably would have made it happen whether you came that night or not. I enjoy those moments. And I like the fact that Amy was already picking out wedding attendants the second night.
Yeah, it was everything was just so smooth for us coming together. It was the right time and the right place. And we had a beautiful wedding, and we've been on the same page since that first night.
Well, you are a deacon and a Sunday school teacher, and I know your faith is a huge part of your life.
Absolutely. And going back to, if I can for a second, of meeting Amy, that's right when I was starting to find my faith, and starting to pray. And that situation was one that God opened up for me to go meet her. We moved to Raleigh and joined a church once we moved here in 2002. At that church, I served as a deacon. I served as an elder. I served on several committees, and Amy was actually on staff in children's ministry for a while. We moved churches a couple of years ago. About now, God, I guess it's been 6 years ago now. I started teaching an adult class in 2015 at this church. Became a deacon 2 years ago, and just being involved in the church, and helping and serving where I can. My major at state was in education, so I enjoy the teaching aspect of it. I learn, as much from the class as they do. I don't consider myself a teacher. I lead the class. I ask, in sales, I ask open-ended questions and I get them talking. And it's been a little bit more difficult on Zoom, but we do have a great class, and very open class, and we have some great discussions.
Speaking of times to pray, let's go to that Carolina game. 1 second left, you're snapping the ball. And jokes aside, though, what are you thinking of when you're leaning over to put your hands on that football to snap it?
I had a wonderful special teams coach named Henry Trevathan, and Coach T is in the North Carolina Sports Hall of Fame for the years he coached high school football. And you gotta remember, Mike, this was in 1990 or 1991. Computers were not a big thing, but his comment at the time when he was teaching me and coaching me was, every time you get over that football, you have to go into automatic mode. Just like on a computer, when you hit the enter key, you know exactly what's going to happen every time. Said, I don't care if you're exhausted, if you're breathing hard, if you're crying, if you're sad or happy, when you get over the ball and put your head down, you go into computer mode and you hit the same key every time. It's muscle memory. So once I got over the football, everything was drowned out. There was nothing else there. If you start, it's like a golf shot. If you start thinking during your golf shot, there's no telling where it's going,
We're
which is
all
my
good.
golf game.
Yeah, we're all good on the driving range, aren't we?
That's right.
I found out early playing golf. It's like, boy, it's hard to count when you're playing. So, dummy, quit counting. Just hit the
Right.
ball. If someone wants to get into the insurance world today, what advice would you give them on how to approach that?
I would say research first. Sit down with somebody you know and trust. And the reason I say that, Mike, is there are so many different insurance professions that they could get into. As I mentioned, Ken started in the claims department. You're going out and handling claims. There's not a lot of office time for an outside adjuster. There are also inside adjusters who, take that initial call. There are underwriters who are, underwriting the business. There are processors. From our point of view in the agency, there are, customer service reps or account managers who are mainly inside, taking the phone calls, talking to the clients. There are producers who are out generating business. That's a lot of the people that you find in the BNI groups. They're out producing business, and that leads or lends itself to a commission-based payment system. And then, of course, as a business owner, I wear a lot of different hats in management. I'm still consider myself a producer. So I would say research and find out what area you want to be in. Mike, you drive down the street, there's an insurance agent on, two or three on every corner. But every vehicle you see has to be insured. Every business, every building is insured. There's a lot of business out there, and it can be a fantastic profession if you just narrow it down to what part of that profession you want to be.
It is a good living, but like anything else, you got to put the effort into it, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it takes a couple of years. As I said, North Carolina is a little bit different. You have to learn the law. There's a licensing process. There's a class you have to pass before you can even sit for the state exam. So they're very serious about it. There's a lot of idiosyncrasies you learn in the class that you have to then get in the real world and put into play.
Was there any doubt you would end up in the family business?
I was the only one of the three boys who grew up saying I wanted to work with daddy. And then I was the last one to come in, which was really interesting. I never thought I would want to do it. And when I moved back from Charlotte in 2002, I was moving for the family and not so much the business. I was not in insurance when I was in Charlotte. But when I got into it, I realized how much I enjoyed it. At the dance competition last weekend, there's another dad who is an insurance agent. And, we just got together and talked for 45 minutes because most people don't like to talk about insurance. It's not very
They do
exciting. People would come and listen to us and then they would leave. But it's truly something that I enjoy, the business and the relationships I build with either referral partners or the clients themselves.
Is there conversation about a third generation of Lawson Insurance folks?
That started about 2 years ago, Mike. My nephew, Ken's son, joined us. He works in our commercial department with his dad. And, again, not something that he grew up thinking I want to be an insurance agent. But, after 6 months in, he said, this is actually kind of fun. I'm learning a ton. So he's been with us a little over 2 years, and is a great part of our organization.
Wonderful. I know that's neat to have that, to be able to share that, because I know your dad probably thoroughly enjoyed working with three sons. So I can imagine that was a wonderful experience for everybody. Miller, we've been putting your phone number up on the screen here. What's the website they can go to get some more information about you guys?
It's really easy. The www.lawsonins.com. LawsonINS.com.
All right. Love the stories. I thoroughly enjoy family businesses and multi-generational family businesses. And I knew this would be a fun interview because, like I said, we've known each other for a little bit, but I just love the story. Thanks for sharing the tips. Wish you guys the best of luck with everything. And we very much enjoyed the conversation today.
Mike, it's always a pleasure to be. Thank you for asking me to be here. You and I, as friends, have always had great conversations. We met as business associates in a BNI group, or we met again in a BNI group. So, I cherish our friendship, and I appreciate you calling and asking me to be on here.
Glad to have you. The stories are wonderful, and we will see everybody next time on Triangle BNI.
You are tuned to the Nissan Communications Network. If you tuned in too late, you can always watch each program in its entirety or download an MP3 audio file of it in the archives section at nissancommunications.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Twitter, and like us on Facebook. Sponsored by Telestream's Wirecast software, StreamingGear.com, Carolina Apparel, and DeltaForce.net.